Hi, welcome to the Pharmacy Residency Podcast. Remember the Pharmacy Podcast Network. If you want to get any of the documents I'm talking about today, you can go to residency.teachable.com. There is a general letter of intent that you kind of have to scroll down to the second part that under the Extreme LOI makeover, and it's just kind of a Word document that kind of tells you where to put your stuff for the big five, especially clinical, research, teaching, service, and leadership, and it gives you a good framework for the letter of intent. But what I'm finding is that students are not taking advantage of the opportunities when we're talking about a very specialized PGY1 and to some extent the PGY2. But once you kind of get to the PGY2, it's expected that you're more specialized. But we're going to talk today about pediatrics, and I'm going to talk about this because it's relatively easy to kind of translate what you're going to be doing 2, 3, 4 years down the road into how you need to express yourself in the letter of intent to show that you're kind of a pediatric specialist already. And I've helped someone who had no APPE in pediatrics all the way to those that have both hospital and work experience and APPEs in pediatrics. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to show that you are one of them. And that's really what you're doing when you're writing a letter of intent, is you are showing that you're part of that group and you belong with that group. And the only difference between right now you as an APPE student and you as a resident is just a couple of months. And yeah, you're going to learn a bunch of stuff. But what I'm saying is we need to see what it is that a pediatric RPD is going to be expecting when they see your letter of intent, and really what kind of skills they're going to expect you to come in as an APPE student or new graduate. So the first place you actually want to go, and I put this document on the LOI sheet, but the BPS Board of Specialties has a pediatric pharmacy page, and there's a little video that you can watch there. But if you go into Part 3, Pediatric Pharmacy Content Outline, it has 4 domains: patient management, practice management, information management and education, public health, and patient advocacy. And that might not mean something to you, but as I've talked about the big five before, with clinical and teaching and leadership and so forth, what you can do actually is map what you are doing in school now to the work that you'll be doing in the future. And let me show you a little bit about this outline. It's a PDF document, and I can kind of make it a little bit bigger here. So the big thing here is to kind of get yourself out of the, it is very pediatric vocabulary centric. And what we want to do is kind of take a little bit of a big picture approach, and is, as a pediatric resident, what are the things that you're concerned about? And the nice thing is that the percentage of the exam in some ways kind of reflects what you're going to be doing. So around 3/5 of the exam, 57% of the exam, is patient management. And usually when you think about being a pediatric resident, that's kind of the first thing we're talking about. So it's tasks related to the comprehensive management of pediatric patient, collecting, interpreting, integrating pertinent clinical data. So if that's what you're going to do, what you want to do is provide examples, especially with very concise stories about things that you've done. And so if you're kind of at a loss, like, well, what do I share with them? Well, these are the things that they expect you to be able to do, to collect that information, analyze the information. But really, where we get down to designing and implementing a plan, okay? How have you participated in the management of a pediatric emergency or something like that? So for me, my daughter stopped breathing, and I've talked about this story many times, and what do I do? And the first thing I do is I start CPR, and I'd completely forgotten about the whole nose and mouth thing, and she had pyloric valve stenosis. So basically what was happening was we had given her so much formula that the formula was getting in the way of her breathing because of the regurgitation. And so by breathing in, I wasn't doing anything. But once I breathed into the mouth and the nose, I was able to put enough pressure that she could vomit and then start breathing again. Now, hopefully you don't have a pediatric emergency in your own family, but that's an expectation that they have. So the first thing I always hear from students is, I don't know what to write. Okay, what you can do is you can print this PDF off and you can start kind of saying, okay, where have I done this? But also, if you have not yet done your API, you can start looking at the things that you're going to do and start writing them in here. And that may seem a little laborious, but what you really are doing is getting ready for the interview. And you're also identifying areas that you might be missing. So if you do this in the first 2 or 3 weeks of your API, and you have a midpoint evaluation, I know not all preceptors have the time to do that midpoint, but you have a midpoint, you can say, okay, well, it looks like I've done these things. And in looking at this, there's a couple of them that seem really important that I haven't quite gotten to yet. Is there going to be an opportunity for me to do them? And this is when we get to, kind of patient management. And then we can kind of move on to some of the bigger picture things, which is going to be domain 2, practice management, medication safety, acknowledging these as well. But again, it's really going to be kind of that first clinical component. But then also showing that that there are 4 domains. And that third domain is going to be the research and education. So how have you gone into places where you have helped, and this is maybe volunteering at schools and things like that, where you've taught kids about medications. Maybe it's the candy versus the medicine type thing and those types of things. But maybe it's an ASHP presentation. And then the fourth part is public health and patient advocacy. To many extents, this is kind of the service that you do in the professional organizations and volunteering and things like that. And this is about 5% of the exam. Now, when you're writing your letter of intent, and what I have for you is a Word document, and it's freely accessible on the residency.teachable.com. I'm going to go through this and show you how I've mapped that BCPPS information into your letter of intent. And I know that the rule of thumb is 1 page only, but there are many, many exceptions to that. The first thing is how does someone actually read a letter of intent? Well, they actually don't read it. I know that you think that because you spent hours and hours and hours on this, that someone is going to spend hours reading it, and that's just not the case. The numbers just show that it is literally mathematically impossible for the number of people that are reading these to read all of them, and then certainly in their entirety and in depth. So what they usually do is they scan the first sentence of most of the paragraphs to see if some things are there. So what you want to do is be very judicious about your first paragraph, the one they'll probably read most intently, and then make sure that things are in the right place so that they see that you kind of get what's going on. And if you really want to get good, use some of those terms. Instead of saying my clinicals or my APIs, you say for pediatric patient management, okay? And then for pediatric medication safety, and for pediatric research and pediatric public health. Those buzzwords are reminding them that, oh, okay, this person really has kind of got this pediatric thing down. And you might say, well, but only one of my rotations was pediatrics, and then I worked with adults in cardio and adults in ID. Hey, you know what? We know that the drug trials are generally going to be on adults, and just the fact that you have been through those rotations helps prepare you for them. So let's go through this example. It's really a blueprint, and what I really wanted to do is just to kind of get you from, I don't know what to write, I'll just kind of start writing, to, okay, well, let's do a little fill in the blank, follow the bouncing ball kind of thing. All right, so I've just put the traditional thing here. I always recommend putting your address and name in the top here, and you can just double click on the header to get it in there. It saves you a little bit of space because a lot of times this will take up a ton of space. Okay, so then you can put the date and then the name and so forth of the hospital, and then dear doctor, director, whomever it is. Okay, so 6 parts to your first introduction paragraph. Part 1, you're going to want to have an introduction sentence, and each of these 6 should be a sentence or even maybe a combined sentence. So the first sentence is going to be, please don't use "I want to express my sincere interest," but in some way just say, I am thrilled to apply to the Ankeny Children's Hospital PGY1 residency, and I can even just put it in there. Okay, so don't get all over. I am thrilled to apply to the Ankeny Children's Hospital PGY1 residency program. Great, you've told them you're applying. Okay, this one is kind of a name dropping one, and a lot of times students don't necessarily know what to do with this guy. Just say, if you are going to name drop, I really appreciated the time that doctor, and don't put your resident, just put doctor, whomever it is, Dr. Jones and Dr. Smith took to outline the specifics of the pediatric program. But then you have to do this part. Don't just name drop. That's a waste. But you want to put something that was important to you, especially the components in critical care. Okay, so now you're kind of giving them an idea of not only who they are, but who you are. Okay, the next step is to look at their core rotations, and this is huge. So too many students just talk about themselves, and just imagine yourself in a conversation with someone who is talking all about themselves. Yes, I get it. It's your letter of intent. Yes, I get it. You're supposed to tell them about you. But that is boring when you're just listening to someone else. You want to hear from someone else about their connection to you. So let's take a couple of these core rotations, and you can just write them down as A, B, C, D for now. But we'll put cardiovascular, okay? We'll put emergency medicine, and then we'll put something like NICU, okay, neonatal intensive care unit. Okay, and what we can do is we can just create a sentence that says, I am really looking forward to rotations that your site has in cardiovascular, okay, vascular, okay, emergency medicine, and NICU pediatrics. Okay. All right, so all we're doing right now is just kind of getting an idea of what we're going to say. We're not worried about making the LOI. If you work one-on-one with me, I can help you do that. All we need right now is the content. Okay, and you're basically saying that eventually I'm going to be working in critical care, so the NICU is a really important part to me, but even more specifically, maybe emergency medicine or maybe cardiovascular. I have personal experience with this, where my daughter almost had to have surgery as someone who had been born 2 weeks ago, at 2 pounds. And what we almost had to deal with, and we got to meet the person, but there was a pediatric cardiovascular surgeon who came in and looked at her and said, okay, well, if this ibuprofen doesn't help, is it Nurofen or something like that with peds, but if the ibuprofen doesn't help close that open part of her body, around her heart, then what are we going to do? And the answer would have been to have surgery. We were very fortunate. The patent ductus arteriosus closed on its own with the medicine, and so she was able to breathe clearly again, and it was just things were much better after that. Okay, but all you're doing is saying, I'm excited to your core rotations, and we'll just put core for right now, that your site has in cardiovascular emergency medicine and NICU pediatrics. Okay, and this is where it gets kind of cool. I'm especially excited, okay, about, and then start talking about some of the things that maybe make them unique, or that you are just really excited for. In this case, it would probably be advanced pediatric intensive care. Okay? Maybe you've never done bone marrow transplantation. And this seems like something that is really not at very many different places. The investigational drug service. And I get it, the peds were always kind of like, all right, well, what do we do? Because it's, and we wouldn't use contractions. I'll put I am. What do we do? We're going to have a patient, they need a medication, but it's not really used or in the literature a lot for this particular weight or patient with these conditions. How do we make those decisions? Okay. Now, I will tell you that there is an issue here because I put I am, I really, I am, and that gets boring. And you can fix those kinds of things later. But all we're doing is just kind of writing down, well, why am I applying to this program? Well, they have cardio, EM, and NICU. Okay. And then why else am I applying? Well, they have advanced PICU, maybe, bone marrow, which might be unique to that site, and investigational drug service. And now you're getting a real idea of why it is. But what you've done in these first 3 sentences or 4 sentences is say, I have read your website. I am not writing a generic letter. I absolutely have looked into the things that you offer. And then we could do this as well with the longitudinal aspect of it. Okay, and you could just fill these in for now, but this is an intake that I need as people are writing and helping, and I'm helping them one-on-one because I really need to get an idea of what it is that your specialty is going to be. Okay, and so what we can do here is we can put another one here with longitudinal parts of it. So while I've enjoyed, and let's get rid of that italics and put bold. While I've enjoyed doing 1 month rotations or whatever it is for you, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, I'm especially excited to work or to serve in leadership and administration and complete and work with students in the teaching and academia longitudinal components. Okay, and so what you're doing is you're creating this. 1 month should be hyphenated. What you're doing is you're creating a number of sentences that are just going to all come together. Okay, and you'll fill in the blanks later, but right now we just want to get things going. Okay. All right, and then, that should have been part of this, I guess. Okay, one of the options there, or longitudinal component. Your staffing is always longitudinal. Okay, and then I am looking forward to a PGY2 and earning my BCPPS. And you could spell that out if you wanted to, but they know what it is. But what it does is it says, oh, you know the language. You're one of us. Okay, so that's absolutely critical. So don't just say I want to be board certified and so forth. Be very specific. And you might even add focusing on pediatric, cardiovascular, and critical care medicine. So you can go micro niche on this, or micro niche if you want to call it niche instead of niche. All right. Okay. So that's the first paragraph, and you've kind of gotten those sentences together. And now what you want to do is kind of talk a little bit about work experience if you have it. The reason you do this is that work experience is extremely important. Ideally, you have hospital pediatric work experience. If you don't, then make sure you put your hospital experience. And if you don't have that, then your community experience. And if you don't have that, then you're really going to have that kind of appy in peds or something like that, that's very specific. Okay, so I kind of showed you what you need to do with these, and then I'll talk a little bit about these other ones. Okay, so let's start with the clinical paragraph. What you're going to do now is you're going to take what is the first domain of the BCPPS, patient management, and you're going to talk about your core rotations that you did that matched to this. So we talked that we were going to do cardio, so maybe you have a cardio rotation that you did. It was adult, okay? Maybe you have an emergency medicine rotation in spring, okay? And you're just making notes to yourself. And then, okay, now you have a general peds rotation, but you want to move on to the ICU, okay? So maybe the PICU, but you're excited about their NICU, okay? Elective rotation, so you can mention, why are you interested in these things? Well, the pediatric intensive care, because you're interested in critical care, so that makes sense. So we'll just put pediatric intensive care, and we'll talk a little bit about why you're so excited about that. The second part of rotation, second sentence kind of is going to be something about your bone marrow transplantation. And what is it that, kind of got you interested in it? Or is it just kind of a curiosity, like maybe a gap in where you've been? Be careful about saying, they didn't teach me something. You don't want to make it sound like the school didn't. What you want to do is, it was absent from the curriculum or something like that. Kind of go to mistakes were made rather than that school made a mistake. And then the third elective rotation we said was investigational drug service. So we're kind of saying why it is that we are interested in these. So you can see that this clinical paragraph is going to match this introduction paragraph over here. Okay. And then we kind of go to leadership. And so when you're talking about practice management and medication safety, there's a lot of administration that goes on with that. And if you were an organization, obviously it'd be ideal if you're president or vice president. Some of the rubrics, especially at academic medical centers, only give points for those two positions. But you can talk about other leadership, especially if it leads to pediatrics. So maybe you are working with kids and there is no available position like that would be pharmacy school related, or maybe you're a distant student and you had to do it in your own neighborhood. Okay. But this is the second part that a lot of students miss, is that don't forget to tell the impact you made. Okay? So we'll kind of combine those two together here, and we'll say, as president of my student chapter, and I won't put a particular organization, I led a drive to help children understand the value of influenza immunizations. And you're going to get You're going to get two kinds of people. You're going to have the people that want the emotional impact and some that want the data. So you can say, we immunized over 600 children, okay, or taught 600 children, whatever it is, about immunizations. And then you want to have that part that's the emotional component, which is, and we saw their fear of getting a shot into excitement as they realized they could defend themselves and empower themselves by choosing to get the shot, or something like that. My daughters just recently got the COVID vaccine, and it was a big deal for them to do it without crying. So they're 10 years old, and they're like, their goal was to get the shot without crying. And that may seem like a little thing, but I assure you that for them, that was a really big deal. It was a way that they could take control of a situation they can't have. We were going to get the shot. That was a given. But how could they be empowered? And they could be empowered because they had the opportunity to say, okay, well, if this thing is going to happen, I'm not going to cry. I'm going to be a big kid about it, and so forth. Okay. Next thing is going to be publication, and I would just say make it pediatric related. Okay. So if ideally it would be pediatric related, or find a way to make your publication kind of go with you. So if you have an adult cardiovascular publication, maybe you can say how it will get you ready for a pediatric cardiovascular rotation. Okay. Poster presentation, obviously if you're at ASHP or ACCP or APHA, whatever it is, or even local ones or local presentations. Okay. Tutoring teaching experience, especially with kids. Or what you can do is show that you are bringing people on. So if you were helping P1s or P2s along, however you did it. And then cite opportunities for teaching. Talk about their teaching certificate. Okay. Teaching certificate. All right. All right. So what we're doing is we're making sure that we acknowledge what we've done, but also show, don't tell, that we are becoming a pediatric specialist. Okay, so when you're applying to a peds rotation, it's kind of like applying to a PGY2. Okay, all right, we'll kind of move on to the volunteer work. So, just because the exam says that this is only 5% of the exam doesn't mean that volunteer work isn't important. But generally, rubrics do give volunteer work a lot less credit than others, but they do expect some service components. So we would just say volunteer work, maybe locally or with the church. And then you can kind of combine some of the leadership and organization, how you gained organizational skills. While creating this event. Okay. And then the closing paragraphs a lot of time is just as difficult as the opening paragraph, where the first thing you do is kind of put some final words. I'm so excited to apply and have this tie to your program, okay, and whatever that tie is, whether you were an APPE student and so forth. You put the name of the program to make sure that they know that you're not just throwing some letter out to everybody. And then you thank them for their time. And this can be just as simple as thank you for your time, or I appreciate you reviewing my application. Okay. Sincerely, and you can put in kind of the picture of the signature application or whatever, and then I'm a pediatric applicant, PharmD candidate, and then you can put your college there. For me, when I'm working with somebody, I need the websites of the PGY1 and PGY2. That's why that's here. But what you really want to do, and I work on two screens all the time, is you want to kind of look at PGY1 and PGY2, and I'll just put this in here, by putting notes about the PGY2 specific to their site, you show that you are really looking to stay with them, which is a big deal a lot of times, and that you have looked ahead and a great degree of professional maturity. So again, all those things are huge. All right, so let's kind of go over what we've done here. Okay, so what we've done is we've created 6 sentences in the first paragraph. They don't have to have 6 sentences, but we've introduced ourselves a little bit and talked about their program. We've talked about some connection that we might have to them or to pediatrics that we kind of share in common. We've looked at the core rotations that this particular site has. We've looked at the elective rotation that this site has. We've looked at the longitudinal rotations that they have. And then we've told them about our future plans, maybe as a PGY2 or BCPPS. We've mentioned any work experience, if we have any in the hospital. We've taken the time to connect our APPEs or our experiences at work to their rotations in cardio, emergency medicine, and general peds moving on to intensive care. We've talked about why we're interested in their electives in intensive care and bone marrow transplant and investigational drug service. And that really falls under the BCPPS patient management aspect. Then with practice management, we've talked about maybe being president or vice president of an organization and the impact that we've made. Something I didn't mention before, but you can also talk about the opportunities at the residency site. Is there an opportunity to be the chief resident? Or is there an administration and management? And this shouldn't be. You could talk about your administration or management API as it relates to their longitudinal administration rotation or something like that. Then when it comes to research and teaching, have we mentioned any publications first? Then national posters or regional posters. Tutoring and teaching, especially maybe with kids or relevant to the pediatrics. Then site opportunities for teaching. Have we talked about their teaching certificate and which particular colleges they're involved in? Because that takes you away from the generic letter of intent. Then we mention any service that we might have done locally or with a church or with kids, and then how we've benefited gaining organizational skills while creating that event. That goes to the public health and patient advocacy. Okay? And then we've closed by saying, okay, well, I'm really excited to be part of the program, kind of keeping that energy up, affirming the name of the program and letting them know that, you are writing this to them. And then you're thanking them for their time because it really does take a long time to do this. Sincerely, and you can put in an image of your signature there if you want. And then making sure that you have the websites for their site and putting those in there. And then taking the time to look ahead to the PGY2, seeing what they offer. And it's not a crime to make a 2-page LOI. They're going to scan it anyway. What a 2-page LOI can let you do, and there's benefits to it and ways that you might not want to use it. But what a 2-page LOI allows you to do is gives them more opportunity to learn more about you. And what happens with a 1-page LOI is you kind of lose some of that extra detail that they might have. So usually you're going to see recommendation 1 to 2 pages, something like that. Okay. So again, you can find this blank document and then this document that I just filled in. You would go to residency.teachable.com, and you can either click on Extreme LOI or go to residency.teachable.com/P/Extreme LOI. You scroll down to Pediatric, PGY1 or PGY2 content, and there's going to be free previews here. And it's going to be the Pediatric Blueprint. That's where you're going to find this Word document. All right, so again, if you want to work one-on-one with me, that's great. You sign up for whichever course you need, the letter of intent, the CV, or if you want to learn more about the point system for how they grade you with interviews, you can sign up for any of those 3 courses. And you can always reach me at tonythepharmacist@gmail.com.